Right now, I can't hear. Oh, you just need to mute yourself.
Yeah. All right. Tracy, whenever you say we'll go, we'll go.
Go.
All right, let's call the meeting to order at 6:00 p.m. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Kristen Runge,
Present.
Trisha Brown,
Here.
Al Essow, David Kennedy, Todd McCulloch,
Here.
Chuck Tewes, and Abigail Zellner.
Present.
And next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any corrections or changes from the minutes?
No, I would move to approve.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? All right, motion carries. Next up is public comment, and if you are planning on commenting on the TID district under consideration tonight, we do have a public hearing. You might want to save your comments for that moment in time. Do we have anyone who is wanted to make a public comment?
We do. There are 4 registrants. I'm not sure exactly if they're related to the public hearing item, but I'll read them off. So Dennis Helt.
Yeah,
Is your for TID or not related to the TID?
for the TID, I mean, not necessarily this one in particular, but.
In TID in general?
Public comment, you said with.
Public comment now, and then the specific comments for the TID district number 10 that's under consideration during the public hearing.
Oh, may I go up?
Well, can I clarify?
Okay. Yes.
Any comments made at public comments are technically not part of the record.
Oh,
If you want
okay.
your comments to be part of the record for the TID discussion, you have to do it during the public hearing.
But if they're
That's not tonight.
No, that is
It
tonight.
is tonight.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not now. This
is just
But it's-
public comment.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right, I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
okay,
I'll wait on that.
All
okay.
right.
Next, Linda Ashmore. This is public hearing. Okay. Jerry Ashmore. Okay. Mary Heimbecker.
I vote.
Okay.
Hi, Mary Heimbecker, 306 West Third Street. Wanakee. I would like to see some of our ordinances looked at that hold the size of new stores to 54,000 square feet. Wanakee has limited amenities to shop because of the size limits. Many live here, but we have to go out of the village for many items due to these antiquated ordinances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah. All right. Any others? All right. Seeing none. All right. Next item on the agenda is presentation and public hearing regarding the proposed creation of tax incremental district number 10, the proposed boundaries of the district, and the proposed project plan for the district. And the state statute and or village code requires public hearings on certain specified matters where the public can comment. The meeting chairperson, that's me, will identify rules for providing comments. The comments must be related to the district and made from the microphone so we can record them.
All right, to begin things off this evening, we have Todd Taves, our financial consultant with Ellers. And so I guess at this point, I would simply turn the microphone over to him, and then Todd, just let me know when you want me to proceed to the
Sure,
next
if you
slide.
could bring up the slides, Tim. So the Authority was provided with a full copy of the project plan in your agenda packet, which was also available to the public. I'm going to just hit the highlights prior to the public hearing comments, just to get everyone on the same page as to what we're talking about. So this would be TID number 10, newly created district within the village. And next slide, Tim. This identifies the physical geography of the TID. So 6 parcels in total highlighted in the yellow shading. So we've got 19 on the north side, Hogan Road on the east. So this is basically the southwest quadrant of that intersection. Also for reference is the boundary of existing TID number 3, which is just about to close. So TID number 3 was the original Wanakee Business Park. Also within this boundary of TID number 3, but not part of TID number 10, we also have TID 9, which is primarily the Octopi facilities, and then recently amended to add the pending newcomer facilities. So again, 3 different TIDs in play in this area, all related to the business park. This district is important because it will fund infrastructure, but also because TID 3 is closing, there's a necessity to create a new district to gain additional years in which to recover necessary project costs. So this will be a mixed use district, which has a 20-year maximum life. The statutory requirement is that at least 50% of the territory within that physical geography be suitable for some combination of industrial, commercial, and residential development. In this case, there is no residential development expected to be primarily industrial, with the possibility for some commercial along the highway. In this case, all 76 acres within the proposed district are suitable for industrial commercial, so we meet that test. This is a TID that is being created to pay for the cost of public infrastructure. So 2 primary projects, and we'll show those on a map here in a moment, but it would be the extension and completion of Frank H. Street to include all the attendant utilities and other public amenities, and then the improvement of the intersection of State Highway 19 and Hogan Road. And this map, again, a blow up here of the proposed district boundary, but also identifying the 2 projects I just mentioned. So you can see the red circle, that would be the intersection improvements, and then the various other colors are related to that first project I mentioned, which would be the Frank H. extension. So you've got the road itself in sort of the red color, the sewer and water in the green and blue. There's a path as well as detention pond and intersection improvements also at Frank H. and Hogan. So again, these are the projects that are included within the plan that the district would be intended to fund. This is a list of those estimated project costs. So we've got the Frank H. extension, little over $5.3 million in total, $2.5 million as a placeholder for the intersection improvements at Hogan and 19. Certain administrative expenses that the village would incur simply to create and keep the district open over its life. We have cost of financing, and then projected interest on the long-term debt that the village might issue to fund these projects. All told, about $14.4 million in estimated costs that have been included in the plan. This is a projection of the development that would be anticipated to incur in the district over time. I know that's a little bit hard to read on there, but what we have across the top are the various areas that are identified by the ownership group. And then we've got an indication of the absorption, in other words, the amount of acres that would be developed on a projected basis year over year, as well as the assumption of the square footage of improvements and a value assigned to those. What this indicates is that over the period of 2024 through 2029, we have the potential to have about $67.3 million in new commercial and industrial development within that TID boundary that would generate incremental value. When we take that, and you notice the number here, it's 64 million versus the 67 million on the previous slide. The reason is there's roughly $3 million in value within the district right now. So we're only counting the value above what's known as the base that would generate those new taxes. And if the district were to remain open for its entire 20-year maximum life, we would expect to collect just over $20 million in that time frame. The final spreadsheet exhibit then is the cash flow. Again, a lot of numbers going on here, but the big moving pieces on the revenue side are those $20 million in tax increment coming in. We've got proceeds from village debt coming in, and that's kind of an in and an out. They come in to fund the projects and then they're expended to pay for the projects. So the cost that comes out of the cash flow is the debt service. We're showing a proposed 24 issuance for the Frank H extension and 25 issuance for the intersection improvements on State Highway 19, again, with estimated debt service. And what this indicates is that we would maintain a positive fund balance throughout the district's life, other than the first year where we've got the cost of creation. And we would aggregate enough tax increment revenue that we could pay off that debt early, again, on a projected basis by the year 2040, which would be 6 years prior to the 20-year maximum life of the district. We held the organizational joint review board meeting at the beginning of October. We're here, of course, tonight for the hearing. If the authority elects to advance this evening, we are expecting that to go to the village board for consideration on December 4th. And then we've scheduled a final joint review board meeting. I'm forgetting the exact date, but a couple weeks later before the end of the calendar year.
That's December 20th.
December 20th.
Right. Thank you very much. Let's declare the public hearing open at 6:10. So, Tim, would you like to
So
call on-
there are some comment sheets, but if I may, I did actually receive a comment or a communication from someone earlier that had several questions. And if it's okay with you as part of the public hearing, I'd just like to address a few of those questions.
Please?
Provide
yes.
those.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would-
First question, could the village provide what it would cost to build the roads and infrastructure in the business park without a TID? Essentially, the cost of construction is the cost of construction, whether it's in or out of the TID. So that, let's say a $5 million road would still be a $5 million road, whether in or out. It just depends on how that gets funded. Second question, has there been any conversation with the developer about paying back the TID money, such as what is being done with the newcomer TID? Short answer is no, because the way the construction of this project plan is set is that it's primarily funding infrastructure, whereas the previous TID 9, that was a developer incentive. So technically that was the incentive that was paid back in that case of TID 9. In this case, it's infrastructure. So we have not approached the developer with that aspect of it yet. It looks like Hogan Road construction is included, but I thought that was part of the newcomer TID. Is this more construction, or am I thinking of the Frank H Street extension? I'm not exactly sure what the questioner is asking there, but it may have to do with the intersection improvements at Hogan and 19. And I would say if that's what the questioner meant, there is a portion of the increment in TID 9 that's allocated toward those improvements, as it was determined that there was a small impact for the businesses in that district that would have an impact on TID 9. So I think it was like 10% of the intersection costs, up to 10% could be allocated. Let's see, when the public hearing notice goes out, can you include the number of acres and dollar amount? Generally with the public hearing notice, there's a mention of a project plan being available. So all that information is available in that project plan. Was any consideration given to developing this into 2 smaller TID increments? Short answer, I think, is no, not really. I think generally when a municipality wants to develop a TID, it wants to capture as much increment as possible to create the increment necessary to fund those projects. So no, and the short answer, I guess, is no, it was not. In fact, I think it was probably the other way, that we were looking at hopefully expanding the size of this. As you may recall, the neighboring property owner withdrew from their annexation request, and therefore those lands would be outside of the village and not eligible in here. Let's see. Can you identify the conservancy acquisition? I think what the questioner is referring to is within a project plan, there is a list of eligible project costs, and acquisition of conservancy land is one of those. However, I don't know if there's specific lands in the TID boundary that will be acquired for conservancy. So it's an eligible project cost, but I don't know if there's a specific area within the geography of the TID that's earmarked for that. Next, let's see, could the draft developers agreement be included in the packet? Short answer is yes, if there was one, but we don't have one yet. Generally, the DAs run after a TID is created. The instance of TID 9 with newcomer was a little bit different in that it was really specific to one parcel. So in that case, we were working with that entity to run those in concert. But since this TID boundary involves several property owners and developers, there's no development agreement at this time. So with that, I guess I would go back then to our previous registrants in no particular order, starting with Mary Heimbecker.
Hi, Mary Heibecker, 306 West Third Street, Wanakee. I'm opposed to the creation of TID 10. We have two developments that are going strong with no TID. Those developers have done all their own infrastructure. They're strong, they're well-developed, there's new businesses in them, and there's not been any problem with those developments. One of the developments on our main street that received $5 million in TID has empty storefronts on it. How is this affecting us as taxpayers? TIDs are published as not affecting taxpayers. This is simply not true. The developers receive the money that should be going to our schools, county, and Madison College. The needs for public services also increase with the new development, but no tax revenues come in from the TID to our village for any of that until after this TID closes. So what, they're talking 20 years. So for 20 years, the taxpayers that are currently here will be fronting any new things that have to happen to cover that new development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next up.
Next, Jerry Ashmore.
Hi, I'm Jerry Ashmore. I live at 114 South Street in Wanakee. I'm concerned that whenever we have proposals of TIDs like this, there aren't really alternatives mentioned as other ways that the same things could be accomplished. We have a number of public infrastructure that's considered to be built here, and there's no discussion of what it would cost to do this by regular borrowing by the village. So we don't really find out what's the other choice besides doing a TID. It's just, here's the way we can do this with a TID, and let's go ahead and approve it. So it seems like we're missing a lot of information that would be good for a good choice in this case. Here we have a good public infrastructure for the improved intersection at Hogan Road and Highway 19. Everybody drives through that coming in and out of the village, so that's a good improvement. I'm kind of wondering what exactly is the great public benefit from extending Frank H. Street. There's a handful of owners, property owners in this area that are looking to develop this land and build on it, or sell to somebody who will build on it and develop businesses here. They stand to make a lot of money here. And back in the days when entrepreneurs took actual risks, a developer would put in the roads and put in the infrastructure themselves and recoup the money by the profits that they can make by selling the land or developing it. And that seems to have kind of gone away. It's like the village is going to pay for all this, and the developers or the landowners get extra profits that just kind of come their way, sort of free money for them. So $5 million for Frank H. Street. Why isn't there any kind of discussion of a possible consortium among these property owners to cover that cost? It benefits them. It doesn't really benefit much of anybody else. In the meantime, and when all their tax increment is being used to pay for the TID, and by the way, through 2040, Dane County has $2 million worth of tax increment diverted to this TID by the projections that they've given us. MATC has $500,000 that goes to the TID. Wanakee Schools has $7 million of tax increment that goes to the TID, and the village itself has nearly $4 million. So that's a lot of money that's going to this TID instead of being used for purposes that pay the village's bills. And in the meantime, village taxpayers like those of us that are here to comment tonight, we're paying, for instance, the electric bills for the extra street lighting in this new area. We're paying for the snow plowing on Frank H Street. We're paying for the mowing and maintenance of the stormwater retention pond that shows up in the middle of this. It was kind of interesting that he said all 76 acres of this are developable, but then there's a road shown in the middle of it. Then there's a big stormwater retention pond. I don't think you can develop on the road, and I don't think you can develop in the stormwater retention pond. So it seems to me like it's less than 76 acres. So I just like to say that when you vote, if you do, to approve this for recommendation to the village board, essentially you're voting for higher taxes for the rest of our taxpayers in Wanakee, and essentially you're voting for some free benefits to a few property owners that should be out there hustling for their money on their own. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jerry.
Next, Linda Ashmore.
I'm going to echo the comments from Mary and Jerry. I'm opposed to this TID, and it's because that the tax dollars, and Jerry mentioned the tax dollar amounts, those increments are not available to those taxing districts. They go to the developer. And if it's a developer incentive, it's free money. It's free money. It's tax money that's being diverted to the developers or the businesses. If it's actual money that's being spent on building the roads, that's different. I really have a hard time with the report saying there's no budget impact. We had a $9.4 million pool referendum, and Renee did a nice, figuring out how much of an increase that would be for taxpayers, and it was an increase of $54 per $100,000. So we're looking at $14.4 million that the village is going to obligate, and we're saying, oh, there's no budget impact. As Jerry said, there is an impact because the other taxing jurisdictions that aren't in TIDs, they're going to have to make up for those services. If the village does want to help with financing, I really think it deserves more of a discussion than one public hearing, especially before a body that's not elected for the most part. And if they're going to do it, I think we should just be looking at the roads and the infrastructure. There should not be developer incentives at all. I think, kind of alluding to what Jerry did, that we need to look at other options. There's, I think it's $50 million that was just released by Governor Evers on Monday that goes to infrastructure cost. Maybe we can tap into some of that money. Similar to what Jerry was talking about, I looked up, like, how do other communities develop, their roads, or if they want a new development for a business park. Well, one of the ways that they do it is that the developer develops the lots. The village might loan them money, or one way is the developer just does it on their own, which we've seen with Heritage Hills. The other way is that maybe that the village, because they want Frank H Street and the Hogan Road, would help pay for that, but then you do a special assessment that the business park is who benefits. The business park should be who pays, not us. And I guess the reason I was asking about the Conservancy is that there's no tax coming from it. So the whole idea of having a tax incremental district is to say, we're building something that's going to generate taxes, and we're going to have money come from this. And I love conservancies, but I don't think it really belongs in a TID. So is a conservancy just a retention pond? When I think of a conservancy, I'm thinking of a place I can go hike. I think that anything this large, we're talking about a $14.4 million commitment, should go to a referendum. And I know from listening that Tim has talked about that DOT needs an answer soon, because they're going to also be looking at doing that road. But we've known since 2021 that there's been talk of doing a TID and that we needed those things done. So there is time, not right now maybe, but when you have something come into the village and you're talking TID right away, then maybe we should be looking at, should we be doing a referendum? And that you answered my question about there's Hogan Road improvements, but one of the big selling points when I was listening to TID 9 was like, oh, we're going to get this improved. And so I was kind of disappointed, and maybe I just missed it, that it's only 10% of the money. If one of the big selling points when people come in and say, we want to do a TID is that we're going to create jobs. And maybe that's true. But if we're going to create jobs and we're looking at most of them being manufacturing or industrial, then I think that the TID should have a tie to a livable wage. A livable wage in Dane County is 16 something an hour for a single person and $25, about $25 an hour for a family of 4. So split the difference, say $20 an hour. Because when you bring in, things that are just paying minimum wage, I don't see that really benefits the community a whole lot. I would like to see the developers agreement included in the packet when you start going into when the village board is going to decide, because so many people are very frustrated with some of the other TIDs that have happened because developers are getting paid money. That one example is that Hubdy, built an apartment building that is at market rate, but they still get paid a developer incentive. So it just seems like we're throwing money away. That's taxpayer money.
Sorry, excuse me for interrupting. We're at 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry. I didn't know we had a time limit on these.
All right, thank you, Linda.
We
Any
we do have one more out in the ether, as it were, Al Dassow. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry, Dennis Help. And then followed Al Dassow is actually in the participant waiting room.
Well, I'll be short. The previous 3 covered everything I was going to say and more. What I don't like is this, we're growing so fast and we're promoting it so fast and it's this build, build, build. Is it a small town or are we going to have a big city here or what is it going to be? And the businesses are getting a benefit out of this. Also, I was wondering about at a previous board meeting, they said the guy the lawyer for Stotz's or somebody said the grade on this land is so low, they'll have to lift it up with tons of dirt. And so who's paying for that when that happens? I just wonder how much, agreeing with the other 3, the taxpayers are paying for this and I just don't like it.
All right, thank you, Dennis. All right, Al, and then it sounds like Robert and then Al. Sounds good.
Can you hear me?
There we
Yes.
go. There you are, Al.
Okay, sorry about that. Not too savvy on Zoom. By all means, it's a kind of a strange situation for me to sit here looking at a computer screen, listening to the discussion and having this discussion. But unfortunately, I can't be there for health reasons. I miss my comrades there at the table. And because I'm not at the table and based on the current village rules and regulations, I'm talking to the committee as a member or a citizen at large at this point in time. I should probably introduce myself. My name is Al Dassow, 828 South Meadowbrook Lane, Waunakee, Wisconsin. So I'm speaking to the committee based on, I did review the packet of information, and I do support and agree with the recommendation, or I guess I don't agree, and do recommend that the CDA go ahead and approve and recommend to the board approval of the district. But I do have some, and without the benefit of having a discussion or question and answer time period, because I can only sit here and talk to you as opposed to ask questions and get some clarifications. I do have some pretty significant concerns about the financial projection that was done and the sustainability of that projection. To me, it looks like there's pretty significant infrastructure costs that are being spread over 6 lots. And those 6 lots have some pretty significant development on them. So in order for this to work and pay back in 15 years, there's got to be some pretty significant development. The problem I have is the 5 out of the 6 lots come from PID 3, and they were on the market for 23 years. So what's to say that these lots are not going to be on the market for another 10, 15 years before they actually sell. And again, it's unfortunate I don't have the ability to ask questions and get answers, but that would be one of my concerns, is that the amount of this infrastructure costs being spread over 6 lots, and then the amount of the increment that needs to be added for this TID to pay back that money within the 15 years. The other problem that I have with the financial projections and study is it doesn't include additional incentives that more likely than not are going to be requested by people who buy the lots and want to develop those lots. So when I would guess that any business who's going to want to come in, they're going to ask for additional incentives to develop in that TID. So I'm not certain that, based on additional monies and the aggressive improvements that have to be done, or that it's going to pay for itself within that 15-year time period. Especially when 5 of the 6 lots have been on the market already for 23 years. So that's all I have. Like I said, I do support and I do agree with the TID going ahead and making these improvements to the infrastructure. I have a little bit more concern if the TID were being used, and I know it will be at some point down the road, to give people who want to develop those lots additional incentives to develop the lots. So those are my comments. And again, I do agree and support the TID approval process. That's it.
Thank you, Al. We miss you tonight. We'll see you soon.
Yes, y'all.
All right. And
Next.
Robert, I believe, has a
Yep,
comment.
last one, Robert
All right.
McPherson.
Evening, CDA. Robert McPherson, 1703 Alexandria Court, Village Trustee. Here as a member of the public tonight, obviously. So my concerns about this, I think I've been consistent in raising my concerns as we've worked through this process, first as a village board, now as it's coming to the CDA, is that something that you've maybe heard from a few speakers tonight. The alternative sources of funding to do these infrastructure improvements are not something that I can tell you as a village board member, at least, that we've really been comfortable with the amount of information that's been given to us as far as, can we do the improvements with or without TID? Is it possible to do these improvements without TID? I don't know that we've ever been given that answer. But it seems that if we're going straight to the TID just because of the matter of the timing involved with the state DOT, we should really be separating out the improvements to Hogan Road the improvements to Hogan Road, not Frank H., to make sure that we are addressing that and looking at that as a way that the village could fund that outside of doing TID. I'm going to give you a number here. 27%. That's the amount of new land that would be going this TID. 73% of the land already in a TID. As Mr. Dassow actually eloquently stated prior to me speaking, that land has been available for development under TID 3 for many years now, the entirety of that TID district's life. To think that we need to once again put it in there, it is going to follow with additional requests for funding for additional incentives within the TID. We've already seen that happen. There's an overlay already in this. There's an overlay on top of an overlay if we do this. On top of that, we know that the land that's not developed in there is already owned by a developer who owns Octopi, who has already asked for significant TID assistance to do improvements on their lands. So they're going to somehow, this might be their 4th time that they'd be benefiting from public financing of things going on that directly impacts their land. The other part of it is that at a previous meeting, we didn't hear a very lukewarm reception from the owner of the Stotts property, at least their representation that came to the meeting. So I'm still not entirely sure, since they are one of the 2nd largest pieces of land in this proposed TID, what exactly it is that we're expecting to see developed in there. And finally, I think in general that it's good to have a smart policy about TIDs, but you have to ask yourself, if you're putting overlay upon overlay upon overlay, you might have to face facts about how that land is going to develop and how it's going to work. If TID is supposed to jumpstart development, TID did not completely jumpstart development in these certain areas, then you really should be asking yourself, why is it that we're going to put another TID where the original TID didn't work? Maybe we start looking at different solutions. But that being said, you know, I obviously can't say one way or the other how I would vote on this, but I would just urge that you really scrutinize this one versus some of the other TIDs that you may have looked at, just because of the complexity of the overlap of the TIDs. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. All right, any other comments before we close the public hearing?
Nope, I think that's it.
All right, let's close the public hearing at 6:34. All right. And let's discuss. So next item on the agenda is consideration and possible action on a resolution establishing the boundaries of and approving the project plan for tax increment district number 10. And Tim, to you, or do we go straight to discussion?
Yeah, I
Anything else to
just
add?
point out Joe Bukovich from MLG, who is one of the primary applicants for the process, is here and probably available to answer questions.
All right. And is there anything you'd like to say before we get started with discussion?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll just kind of start it off a little bit.
Sounds good.
Good evening, Joe Bukovich with MLG Capital, one of the landowners as part of this TID. I'm the representative. First of all, I want to thank you tonight for your time and for your consideration of tax incremental district number 10. One of MLG's main goals when we started planning this program or this TID about a couple of years ago was to fully develop the land, the remaining phase 3 of the Wanakee Business Park, and then also provide a mechanism to fund the intersection. We knew that Hogan Road had to go out and, or the Frank H had to go out and extend to Hogan Road, creating traffic. So there's a long period of time where we were studying the traffic, and that's going to be a big cost. How do you fund both of those? A lot of discussions, and when we started that, the interest rates for developers to borrow were at 4.5%, and it looked like maybe a developer finance TID may be a potential. But fast forward to where we are today, and we're in a very high interest rate environment. And right now, the cost of borrowing for a developer is 8.5%. And when you look at the costs and the revenues being generated, the TID just wouldn't work. It wouldn't pay off paying that kind of interest rate. So that's why we kind of changed gears and asked for the village financed tax district. And what that'll do, it's very similar to the second phase, the part on the south was financed, and that one started in 2005. And this will address some of your comments of why did that phase take so long. That phase was started in 2005, and we had a couple of sales, a couple of buildings went up, and then we had a multi-generational recession, and development stopped for 10 years. And fast forward to 2015, 16, we started getting a little bit of interest in properties and new residents for the village. And since that time, we've sold out of phase 2. So there were some pretty major forces, economic forces, that really affected the development within TID 3. In the portion that we're talking about tonight, the lands just south of Highway 19, that was always considered a phase 3. I don't know if that was part of TID 3. It was part of TID 3, but it wasn't part of the development agreements. And that was just going to be, let's do the phase 2 part first and then do the phase 3. So that land has pseudo been marketed. If there was someone that wanted to come in and take a big portion of that, we probably would have worked with the village when there was still enough time back in TID 3 to get that developed. For the risk side of borrowing money for the village, a part of what MLG is willing to do, and it's what we did in TID 3, was provide a letter of credit to back the payments that the village is making on that debt. So it's a model that's been done before. It's an older model, but in this high interest rate environment, if the development wants to be extended in that area, and also provide a mechanism for paying for that intersection. That's the route that we had to go. In terms of dollars and developers earning their money and all that kind of stuff. The budget, just the cost budget for the MLG property is $2.8 million. And there's another 1.68 million in interest. So if you add that, it's about 4.4 million. We have 20 acres of land that's saleable, that excludes roads and ponds. So that's where buildings can be built is the 20 acres, and that's included in the increment calculation. So if we sell 20 acres at 160,000 an acre, which is a pretty high price, that's a gross price of $3.2 million. You pay income tax on that, you pay brokerage, closing fees, whatever, that's about 35%. So you knock off of 1.1 million, you're at $2.1 million. And there's nobody in their right mind that's going to spend 4.4 to make 2.1. So, and what this is, we're not proposing any developer incentives. This is strictly for public roads. There is one long green line. There's offsite sewer that has to be extended. That's not just extending it along Frank H. That's an overage cost. And again, it pays, it's a vehicle for paying for the intersection. So, I tried to address some of the comments that I heard tonight and then just give a little bit of background on that. So if there's any further questions that arise when the board has their discussion, I'd be happy to help out.
All right. So
Can
questions?
we have the map back up, please? Words don't mean much.
And before you sit down, do we have any questions right away that we'd like to ask? No?
I do.
I just want to comment. I mean, we have not negotiated anything with any of the property owners at this point in time. And so I just want to be careful that we're not trying to negotiate an agreement in a public setting right now. I mean, we talked about this at the village board level. The comments that have been made tonight are valid comments. Now, I think because there's so much yet that still needs to be determined. Now, you can still go ahead and create, there's kind of get the chicken and the egg. Should we create the district and then try to figure it out, or try to figure it out and then create the district? But we have when it comes to the intersection improvements, for example, at the Hogan Road on the state highway, I mean, the village could say, look, we're not gonna create a TIF, we're just gonna pay it ourselves. And then it's just village taxpayers that are paying it, and the county and the school district and MATC isn't participating at all. But we have to determine how much is all of this going to cost, what property owners are going to pay for it, how much are they going to allocate. I would never hold Mr. Vukovich to the idea that their letter of credit is going to cover the entire intersection improvement. That would not be something that would be rational. But like Mr. Dassow said, I mean, that's a major issue here, is how is there going to be sufficient increment that's going to be generated from these properties to pay this, such that the village doesn't get left holding the bag. Now, you can still create the district with all of these questions open, because that's all development agreement related negotiations that have to go through the village board. But I raise that now because I don't want you to go too far along the line of asking questions that really get at development agreement related issues when we haven't even had the chance to really have. I'm sure there have been preliminary discussions on this, but nothing getting down to meats and bones or putting pen to paper.
All right. Thank you for that reminder, Brian. Thank you very much. All right. So with that, let's start our discussion. What questions do you all have? Either for Mr. Vukovich or for anything? Yes, go ahead.
Maybe just in comparison, you mentioned the recession, the impact that has had on the development. In the current market, and looking at this site and what's transpired in the existing business park and the TIF to date, what are you hearing, or what are you seeing, or what are you feeling as far as demand, types of potential businesses, manufacturers that want to go into this space? I mean, and this is nothing that we're holding your future, just anecdotally, like, what is your sense of like what's out there? What's the opportunity?
Sure. We do have 1 3-acre user that's been before the village already, that's gotten some approvals, that wants to go in. He needs a stormwater pond. And we are negotiating with a larger distribution person for the remainder of that land. There's been a hotel idea that hasn't been moved forward yet until this is potentially finished. So
And since we're negotiating on the one larger user, there's still been a number of people calling. A lot of it's distribution and distribution won't work here, like a FedEx or whatever, like something like that, when it's not what the village foresees there. But there's still quite a bit of interest out there for this property. I'm speaking specifically for the MLG property, which is this here. There's another party to this potential TID. They're on the Zoom call if you had specific questions for them as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Other questions? Yes, David.
A question relative to the Frank H extension and the difficulty of developing through that eastern area, Hogan Road, and moving westward because of the elevation there. Is that roadway through there more expensive than the roadway just coming off, that was put in behind Culvers, et cetera? And then when you put the road in, how sellable are those lots in that sloped area there?
Right. The plan for that, I don't have the cost information. That was a breakout from the village engineer from Strand. I'm not sure about the cost differences. But what happens is our side has a steep slope that'll be coming down the road. The road's gonna be relatively flat. The Stotts parcel needs the dirt. We're right next door. It makes it useful that we're together, and it saves trucking offsite or trucking in or whatever. So being able to balance those sites, we did the village engineer did a layout for 150,000 square foot building on 14 acres on our easterly 14 acres. And we were able to do that, get the slope down, plan for the dirt.
Other questions? None? All right, Todd.
Yeah.
Hi, yeah, so I remember the recession, but I remember a lot of years were very low interest rates. So it's kind of doesn't seem right to me that all of a sudden now with the higher interest rates, we open up a TID and all of a sudden magically everybody wants this land. So I'm a little not getting that, why was it when the interest rates were low, we didn't have any takers on this, and now that the interest rates are high, we put a TID on it, then people are going to come rushing for this land.
There's been interest and there's been a number of people that have come, but they haven't been users that the village has wanted. Like I mentioned, the distribution. When it was lower, say 18, 19, 20, whatever, we were still filling up the south side of that park. And there are a lot of smaller users that we had plenty of room for. So during that period, we filled up, and there's a lot of vacant land that was still available starting from 2008 to 2015. So we were filling that up. And right now for the interest rates, unfortunately, we have to deal with that. And then I think even through that lower interest rate, and this might be my own personal opinion, and I don't know if Todd has an opinion on this, but when you have the lower interest rate and developers can do it, that allows the municipalities to say developer pay-go incentive instead of villages taking on that, the borrowing and that responsibility. Back in the early 2000s, we built business parks all over Southeast Wisconsin, here, Beaver Dam, wherever. And they were all this kind of format. And then that all changed post-recession. And I'm not sure if it was interest rates or risk or how that all came about, or a combination of all of the above. So hopefully that kind of addressed your question.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, question this is probably for you, Tim. If we didn't expand the business park in this way, what land do we have available to develop in this region right
You
here?
mean for non-residential development?
Non-residential development, yeah.
This is about it.
Is it?
There may be, there are a couple lots in the Arboretum Office Park that are undeveloped. There is a mixed use parcel as part of the Kilkenny West plat that was recently created. But in terms of open acreage for non-residential development, I think this is really it for now. I don't know, Brian, if you wanted to add, but
I guess the only I mean, the business park exists. It's just a question of whether or not you're gonna create a TIF.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think from from a land use perspective, it can be developed, I mean, as a business park right now. Okay, that was the only clarification I wanted to make.
Okay, thank you.
I think I think the bigger issue is the village needs. And obviously the village went through this process and the property owner decided to maybe wait a little bit, but the bigger issue is actually needing fundamentally more land to have a business park.
Yeah. We could use more land. That is for sure. All right. Thank you very much. So question on, because it was brought up during public comment or public hearing, what is in the TID? It's roads and infrastructure, correct?
yes,
Yes.
yeah, stormwater, water, sewer, sanitary, some multi-use paths, and then the intersection improvements, Hogan and Frank H. and Hogan and 19.
So this is an infrastructure TID, we could consider it. Yeah, that would be fair. All right. The comparison between the pool and TID 10 or this possible TID 10 were made. The pool was not a taxable project. We don't pay taxes to ourselves on the pool, the library and whatnot, correct? Am I getting too far afield, Brian?
No, but I mean, it was a
Yeah.
comment. I mean, that is a correct statement. I mean, I don't know all of the bases as to why the village chose to do the advisory referendum, but that is, you are definitely correct that municipal owned land is not taxable.
Not taxable, yeah. So this is a little bit different situation. Have we ever done an advisory referendum on a TID? You know.
Not in my 2.5 years, but I defer
No.
to Brian.
No.
Yeah, I don't recall one either. Yeah. What other questions do we have?
This is maybe more for Todd, just anecdotally, when you're expanding a business park and you're trying to level the playing field to be a competitive environment, you're either trying to retain the businesses that you have in the region or you're allowing for new businesses, new opportunities to come into the area. One of the benefits of having a tool, a financing tool, is that it gives you some options, whether it's for the infrastructure and we mentioned before is the pay as you go options were available to us. How many, I guess, new business parks, especially ones that have industrial or manufacturing options to them in your experience are successful without TID? It just seems to almost be like you have to have this in order to play in the competitive market.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm sure there are business parks in the state that might have been completely privately developed. We don't obviously create TIDs for those, so I wouldn't be able to necessarily cite them, but very common practice to have a TID created when you're looking at industrial type development.
Other questions? If we don't do a TID or TIF, then how do we finance the extension of Frank H. and the intersection?
That's a good
They're all
question. I
alternatives.
think that's a question for the board to have, but I think that's a good question.
What are the typical alternatives? Do we know?
So I think the way you need to think about this is really a repayment source. So you're going to borrow money either way. Again, because of the current environment we're in, and also the fact that we have multiple property owners involved, which is another factor that really drives the creation of this TIF. PAYGO just isn't a realistic option here. So if we operate on the premise that the village is going to need to finance this, it really comes down to how are we going to repay that debt without a TIF. And I would maybe just point to that last page of the project plan that a couple of people have cited where we show the breakdown, using that as an example. And if you assume this level of development occurs once we have build out, we're looking at roughly $350,000 a year in village taxes. That's what you'd have available to pay debt service. If we're leveraging the taxes of all the jurisdictions, and this was Brian's point, it's closer to 1.2 million. So it's a question of do we leverage the taxes of all the jurisdictions who ultimately will benefit from the increased tax base, or do we put that strictly on the village's tax base? So either way, you're borrowing. It's not a different option. What the option is what financial resources are you going to use to repay that debt?
All right, thank you. All right.
The comment was made in the public, and I do think it is accurate. And while I agree with the recommendation from the staff to create the TIF. I mean, we obviously, and I'm speaking specifically about Frank H. Street now, we obviously have had developers who have just developed
Yeah.
those roads by themselves without municipal assistance in the past. And so that is one option. It may not be a viable option here in light of all of the statements that have been made about potentially the costs associated with this road and some of the environmental aspects of it, but that is an option that the board would have to consider if ultimately the TID were not created and then we were looking at that concept.
All right, thank you, Brian. Yeah. All right, other questions? All right, seeing none, do we have a motion or would we like further discussion?
I would, hold on, I'm going back to the actual motion, sorry. And before I make the motion, I think, and you have made the point, is that this is not a development agreement. This is not a commitment. This is the option that we're creating by establishing this TIF district, correct?
Correct, except you're not really actually doing that tonight. There's two more steps that need
Right,
to
we're
occur, one
recommending it
before the village board and then finally to the joint review board. So it needs to go here first and then on to those two bodies.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
This may seem elementary, but like if we do with this TID district, how does it benefit the taxpayers of Wanakee? Just straight up, how does it benefit them? Yeah, if you could, that'd be great.
At the end of the TID, I believe it was $20 million, or what was the number on the spreadsheets? $20 million of annual taxes that the village will receive, the county will receive, the schools will receive forever.
All right.
I bet they'd love to hear that.
Thank you for asking me a question.
Everybody loves increased budgets, right?
All right, thank you.
I don't think there's an objection to the concept. I think the idea of will it return in the time period allotted? I mean, obviously, ideally, if we spend $15 million, we'd love to have it all developed and taken care of in a 7 or 8 year time period, not 20. And would it develop at all if we don't? It certainly probably makes it more difficult because you have to sell larger increments of land, which limits the number of potential users. I think is fair to say, but
That's the risk, right? All right.
Okay, so I just want to confirm before I make the motion that anything related to the actual agreements, whether it's for Hogan Road or Frank H., those will come separately, right? Correct?
Development agreements would be separate,
Okay.
correct?
But the TIF district has to be established in order to even have those conversations, correct?
Yeah, I see you moving, yes.
I would say it happens differently depending on the project. Sometimes you create the TIF first and then you have the development agreements. There are other times when there's a lot of work that is done on development agreements and they essentially run parallel with the creation of the TIF. I think what's important to note here is creating the TIF or the recommendation by the body tonight does not bind ideally, you would never have this happen, but you could create a TIF district and then not reach agreements on things because they don't satisfy the village board's decision making. And so you have a TIF, but you don't actually spend any money because you didn't have the agreements that were executed. So I just be clear, if you make the resolution or you adopt the resolution recommending, this doesn't bind the village to do anything other than take the next step. And then if the district is created, then there definitely will be negotiations that ultimately the village board will be the decision-making entity on the village's behalf for that.
Okay. Given that and given the public improvements in the infrastructure that would be part of this, I would move to adopt the resolution recommending to the village board that the project plan and boundaries of the tax incremental district number 10 be established as shown in exhibits A and B.
All right, I'll second the motion. Do we have any discussion on the motion? No. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion carries. All right. One more thing on the list today? No, adjourn. Yeah, a motion to adjourn. I move to adjourn. So
I'll second it.
all right. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. Motion has carried and we will adjourn.